Hey, Paul.
Hey Fab, how you doing?
Good yourself?
Good, good.
Awesome. So today, we were going to talk about what we were supposed to talk about last week, which was sales and marketing, hiring, recruitment. I don't think it's something we touched on too much, but I think it's obviously an important topic. And I know you have a lot to say about that. Or you used to have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, I don't have anything to say about it. No, I'm just kidding.
You done? Just hire the people, fire them if they suck.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, do you want me to start?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, it's an interesting thing because really it should be the easiest thing to do to hire someone in sales because the whole process of hiring someone and interviewing them, you'll see if they're good at selling themselves.
Yeah.
Which is true. I mean, you can see what their tone is like. You can see what their body language is like. You can see if if there's a good vibe when they talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
But what you don't know is if they'll continue to do it and if they really have the motivation and if they'll really be committed to the work they need to do on an ongoing basis.
Right.
Which is a lot harder to figure out than we think.
Right. So it's not because they're good in the interview that they'll necessarily be good salespeople. And I mean, I remember a long time ago, I wasn't in sales, obviously I was in marketing, but I was working with a guy who had spent a lot of his career in recruitment. Yeah. And he said there's some people that are quote unquote professional interviewers. So they've gotten interviewing down to a science, and they know exactly what to say, when to say it, how to answer every question and things like that.
Yeah.
And so I'm guessing a salesperson probably even more so, considering most of their job is selling. And so they're used to kind of selling themselves and not.
Yeah. A good salesperson knows how to do a good interview. Here's the good thing is if you know how to be good and fake the goodness, you probably have the good in you. Now, the thing that's hard to tell is do you really feel like doing this job? And why are you applying for this job, right?
Yeah.
Is it just for the money? Is it just a temporary thing? And that's what you have to ask people a question. You got to see what their past is like. If you're hiring a salesperson with experience, well, that becomes a lot easier because then you can see how they've done in the past, if they've achieved their goals, if they've been good at what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
So it's very important too to look at the pedigree. Now, if you're hiring someone new off the cuff, it's probably a lot harder to figure that out because they don't know themselves if they'll be that good. And sometimes they don't know if they'll like the job either because they're doing it for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's the hardest, right? If you're hiring somebody straight out of school or not, I mean, they can think they're motivated, but when they get to it and they realize exactly what the job is, they might not be so much. And I mean, I was a bit kidding, I think, at the beginning when I was saying just hire them and fire them. I think hiring as part of firing and letting people go is also part of the recruitment in a way, and I mean, in some cases you do make mistakes and you could be as prepared as you want and things change and the person really and I think there is a danger in companies to hold on to people for too long just because, we feel bad or we don't feel like having to go through another recruitment process or
the fear of not having anyone in the position.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. And then, so, do you when it comes to recruiting salespeople, do you feel there's anything special? Because you said, it's quote unquote easy for them to sell themselves. But, is there anything else that you need to do? How do you determine if they're going to be a good fit in the long run?
Well, there's a few things you can do, right? There's obviously the interview process when you're actually talking to them, but you should probably create some kind of evaluation to assess how they answer certain questions and how they react to certain things. A form of testing to really to evaluate their skills.
Yeah.
See what they do in different situations. And you've got different types of salespeople, right? So, for example, if you're looking for someone to be a one-call closer, it's a very different approach than someone who's going to be a long-term consultative approach, right? You're not going to ask a bazillion questions to someone who you're just trying to sell a one-time item to. You just want to see if it fits in. and you're trying to sell the benefits at that point, but you're not
Yeah.
being the most consultative human being on earth. So it really depends on what kind of person you're trying to hire. Some assessments say, well, one assessment can evaluate everything, and I firmly don't believe that.
Yeah.
I've seen the results of that, and yes, a good salesperson will be very good in certain situations, but a good salesperson might also be really bored in another situation.
Right. And I mean, I'm guessing from what you're saying, it's like, a complex sales process that could take up to 18 months to close a deal because there's, sales engineers involved and there's spec work to be done and all that requires a different personality or whatever behavioral traits than, like you said, like one quick close, right? One call close, which will require a different type of personality, right? Like one, you need somebody who's extremely, patient and perseverant and this and that. They have to keep the momentum going for 18 months. And the other as well, if it's not happening in 30 seconds, next.
Correct. And that's a very important point. If you're someone who's got the patience to do a very slow selling process and really take your time to get to where you're going, and you like to go deep into analysis and really meet with all the people, or if you're someone who's very impatient and likes to sell something, hey, okay, I'm presenting this to you now and we're selling it right away. Well, that there's a big difference there.
Yeah.
And that's an important thing, right? You have to be able to contend with those two types of people, right?
Yeah. And, according to your, like, from what you've seen, your experience and this and that, obviously you've been in sales for a long time. And you've had jobs throughout the spectrum from sales rep to VP type of thing. How important is kind of the cultural fit? And I know cultural fit is like kind of a big word, not word, but big saying, like big phrase or whatever. It can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. And it's kind of like catchy these days. But how important is the fit within the company?
Well, remember, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So,
yeah,
it's everything. If the person doesn't fit the culture and they won't be happy. They won't. Culture is emotion. Emotion is how you like where you work. It's how you deal with people. So if you're not fitting in the culture, if the culture doesn't fit you, it's going to be horrible. I still remember the meme, with a bunch of people saying, "Oh, we do naked Fridays," and a bunch of people there, and they say, "Well, maybe you're not comfortable being naked on Friday." Well, it's important. It's really important. It really is. I think it's the first and most important thing. You can have the best salesperson in the world if they're not going to be happy doing what they're doing in your company, then forget it. If they don't like the product, they don't like the culture, if they don't like the way you do things, it can have a huge effect on the person's performance and happiness, and in the end, what comes out of it.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense, and I think maybe not all, but a lot of us have seen like the great salesperson, but that just doesn't fit with the company, and it's it becomes a challenge after again for the leaders because they're like, yeah, he or she's great. But at the same time, like they just don't mesh within the company and they're bringing everybody else's morale down and things like that. And you have to see, is there an opportunity cost there too? Yes, they're driving in revenue, but are they sucking revenue out elsewhere, and things like that. So I think, I don't know, I'm not in sales obviously, but I think culture is probably one of the most important things to look at. Cultural fit.
I think it's probably very similar in marketing too. I think that's the one thing I think that culture has a huge effect on any job.
Yeah.
On any job. If you don't, it's not just a sales thing, at a sales level or a marketing level, culture is everything. At a sales level, the most important thing is how are you going to judge whether this person is going to be good, and to have some very specific parameters as to what you're looking for them to have success.
Yeah.
So it's very important. It's very important to do that. Hold on here. So in that sense, if you don't take the time to evaluate the person, you don't take the time to assess whether they're going to fit in your team, then there's a large chance you'll make a mistake. And it really is something that you need to look at. It really is something that you need to focus on to make sure that you're hiring the right person.
Hmm.
And you need to ask some specific questions as to their past, how they've had success, what they like to do. Are you looking for someone who's going to be doing more development? Sales is a very wide array
Right.
of
Yeah.
tasks and responsibilities according to the type of sales you're going to do.
Yeah.
It's enormous. It can have a huge amount of cold calling to do, a huge amount of prospecting. They can have very little amount of prospecting. They can have a huge amount of various things to do. And if you're not doing it, if you're not taking the time to figure it out, oh, this person's really nice and they'll fit in. If you're not presenting the job as it's going to be, you're most likely going to have a failure. I've also had that situation where we hired a bunch of people a few years ago for a job, and the people were just not the right people.
Yeah.
Because they weren't presenting the job as it really was.
Yeah.
If you're trying to make the job prettier to get someone in there, well, they're all leaving after a few weeks because you know what? This is not what you said it would be.
Yeah. And if we go back to what you were saying, right? Like, let's say like the 18-month sales cycle, you probably need somebody who's, like we said, like patient and perseverant and things like that, but probably have stronger project management skills and like it's a long-term sales, right? As opposed to a quick one. Like there's different personalities, competencies, behavioral traits that go with all of those, and just stuff to do, right? If you have an 18-month sales cycle, like probably keeping your CRM and your systems up to date is probably extra important, because if you miss a step, like you could delay the whole thing by another 6 months or something like that.
Yeah, and I think the things you're looking for in a salesperson are very common. Like the basic traits that you're looking for are very common, right?
Yeah.
So if you're looking for someone who's capable, who's got desire, who's got the tenacity, are they going to keep doing what is necessary? The experience, the culture. When I say fit, it's really culture, right?
Yeah.
Do they fit with the company? That's very important too. So all these things you have to ask the questions and find out. Now you can do that in an assessment, but you also need to speak to the person. You need to sit them down in front of you, because culture and fit is very hard to determine in a written assessment.
Yeah.
You can ask other questions, but really you need afterwards to really get into it and see. There's no perfect assessment, and there's no perfect interview, and there's no perfect evaluation.
Yeah.
And people make mistakes. And if we didn't make mistakes, then, recruitment wouldn't be an issue. But there's turnover. People change their minds too. People change. Like you can do super well in a position for a couple of years, and then you decide, I don't want to do something else. I want to grow. I want to try something different. I don't want to be in sales anymore. I want to be a musician. I don't want to be in sales anymore. I want to be in marketing. I want to, I'm an engineer who did sales, so now I want to do more engineering, or vice versa. I've been an engineer my whole life. Now I'm ready to do sales because I really like the client interactions. There's a bunch of things that make people progress. And when they progress, you need to catch the right person at the right time to fit with your company. And there's a bunch of tools that you can use, but ultimately you have to go through the process,
Yeah. I mean, it's happened to me where, like, at a company where I worked at, a salesperson, I don't know if he decided or if he always knew, but kind of figured out he wanted to be a developer. And so like at night he would take dev courses and stuff like that. And, luckily we worked at a, software company. And so they were able to give him the space he needed to grow and develop into this developer position. And I think a lot of it goes, and that's obviously after the hire stuff that we've talked a lot about, which is like the coaching and the mentoring and having that relationship with your employees.
Yeah.
To be able to realize like, oh, there's clearly no longer a fit, what's going on. Like, oh, well, I'm developing new interests. I want to try things out. Like, okay, let's see if we can make that happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is really important to do that. I think people say, oh, well, hiring a salesperson is hard. It's hard to hire a salesperson if you're not a salesperson yourself and you don't have the skill to look for the things that are important. And if that's the case, then hire someone who does know how to hire salespeople, because it is an important task. If you're an engineer and you know what you're looking for in development engineers, well, then that's easy because you know what you're looking for because you have those skills.
Yeah.
It would be like a salesperson that says, I need to hire a development engineer. A salesperson doesn't know how to hire a development engineer. You need to hire a firm that knows how to hire development engineers.
Yeah.
Well, I think the common thing, though, is that most people need salespeople. And often companies, when they start, unless the person came from sales, don't have the acumen to look for those people. People
Sure.
also often hire people that are similar to them, which is maybe not a bad idea because you're looking for culture. You want them to fit.
Yeah.
And, there's one thing I'll say, and this might be a little controversial, but sometimes
Go for it.
for the good of the company, you may want to sacrifice hiring what you think is the best salesperson who's going to wreak havoc and in the end reduce your margins as to hiring someone who fits and has the acumen and you have the mindset and the culture with them to say, yeah, I want to build them. They might not sell as much, but they might cost you less because they're not wreaking havoc in the background.
Yeah, and I mean, you were asking about marketing a little while back, and when we were talking about cultural fit, and my experience, that's probably the biggest element, right? I mean, if they can fit in with the company culture, there are more chances they'll be driven and motivated to succeed within that environment, and they understand the ups and downs and this and that. And obviously, there's some competencies, like you're not always going to hire a brand new person out of school. You might want copywriting skills or ad management skills or performance marketing. Like there are some competencies there, but overall, I mean, I would rather take somebody who has a bit of those competencies and has an amazing fit within the company than somebody who has great competencies but like zero fit. Yeah, like you said, it wreaks havoc, and at the end of the day, it doesn't work. It won't work. It's impossible to make it work. Just because you're coming from different, you live in different worlds, and I think in marketing, the successful recruitment I've done have all been culture first, skills second. You know, I mean, as long as somebody's like, let's say you're hiring a copywriter,
if they don't have, if they don't have the culture, it doesn't matter all the skills they have. It won't fit. They might stay for a couple of weeks or a couple of months or even a year, but it's not gonna be good, And sometimes it's not always so obvious because you might have someone who sort of fits, but you can tell they're not happy. Well, someone who's not happy is not going to be motivated. If they're not motivated, then they're not going to perform.
Yeah,
unless you got them on an assembly chain, and then it doesn't matter if they're happy or not as long as they do the movement, right?
Yeah, but I mean, like that's rarely the case, especially in positions I think like sales and marketing, which is you're kind of the face of the company in a lot of ways with what you do and what you're putting out and all that. And if, going through the motions is not necessarily something that you are able to do in your day in, day out. So I think that's why the more they buy in, the more they believe in it, the more and stuff like that, the more chances you'll have of success. I mean, within a certain, bracket or whatnot. Obviously, like I was saying, like you want to hire a copywriter, but they have to know how to write. Like there's some basic things they need to know, but it's a lot easier to train them on great copywriting skills or methods or whatnot. And they'll be willing to do it if they have a good fit. If they have a bad fit, but they know really well how to do it, like you said, it's just not going to work at the end of the day.
And capacity is very important, right? So capacity, intelligence. For the job that you're looking for. So what level of what kind of intelligence are you looking for? Like what kind of sales intelligence are you looking for? What kind of marketing intelligence? So that's the first thing. If you don't have the basic skills to do it and you can't be taught and you don't have the capacity to learn those skills, well then, forget it. If you're looking for a nuclear engineer and they just don't have the chops to do it, well then you're wasting your time. Yeah. And then culture, culture fit, and then everything else that's around there, desire, motivation, all of those things, whatever makes you move to the right, to do the right thing and surpass and make you happy in what you're doing.
Yeah. So again, I think for marketing anyway, like definitely like, like some marketers and some companies are very like fast paced and very moving and they deliver a lot of stuff and they try a lot of things and, it doesn't matter if things don't work out. And other companies are just slower paced and stuff like that. And I've seen that a few times where you had just different beliefs from the marketing team where some marketers were like in a slow paced company but wanting to move things quickly. So I think on the marketing side, I think that's why to me that's why culture is so much more important. Again, there's certain competencies that you probably need for a specific type of role.
Yeah, and there's some jobs probably where the culture is less important because if you're sitting down alone and you're working on your own, like if you're if you're a data cruncher, well, then maybe culture doesn't matter that much because you're sitting at your desk alone, and it doesn't matter what your thoughts and beliefs are because you're just sitting at your desk all the time. When you have
Yeah.
a job that requires you to be interactive and communicate with other people, well, then culture becomes extremely important. Right. So it's interesting. So, hey, I wanted to run through, if you don't mind, I wanted to run through the things that I look for and I evaluate in a salesperson.
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, they're all important, and none of them, without any of them, you're going to have a problem. So there's desire and interest. I'm reading a list here. There's capacity and intelligence. So your capacity, your sales knowledge, and your business acumen, and also your capacity to learn if you're new, right? How much responsibility, like how accountable, how much do you put into it? How much do you take? How much do you work and take the blame for the things, your successes and your failures? In sales, it's very important. Your tenacity, when times get tough, do you keep going? And your focus, are you someone who stays focused, or are you someone who gets veered off and you lose focus very quickly? If you lose focus very quickly, sales is going to be a very tough job for you because you need, in sales, you need to be very much self-motivated because a lot of what you do is self-driven. And then the last thing we talked about, and it's not the least important, is fit and culture. And all of those and all of these categories, you can't skip any of them. And then, if we're going to a management level, then are they capable of coaching? Are they capable of keeping their team motivated? What do they do to keep their team accountable? How do they do their own recruitments? And then at a vice presidential level, well, what's their leadership like? Are they capable of being directive in getting the team to go in a certain direction and getting them to follow them? Well, there's these different categories, but I think to be a good manager, you've got to understand what a good salesperson is. Do you need to have been the best salesperson? I don't think so. But you need to understand what the best salesperson needs to do. And to be a good VP, you may not even have been the best salesperson. You need to have some good management skills, right? Because if you can't manage a team, then you'll fall apart. But you need to be able to understand and be creative. A vice president needs to be very, in a true vice presidential, you need to be creative and find solutions.
Right.
In a larger corporation, the sales manager might not need to be the most creative person, but they need to be able to motivate the people.
Yeah.
And be able to coach them, to help them. But they might not have to come up with the ideas on how to do that. There might be a pattern, but they need to be able to instill that in the people. They need some creativity and communication. And all of this, by the way, it's communication skills, right? All of this, but all of these things link into communication skills, right? That's the big envelope. That's the mothership. Yeah. And then the salespeople, what I mentioned, all those different other things, that characteristics, I'll read them off to you again. Desire, capacity, keeping yourself accountable, and tenacity, your focus, and the fit in the culture.
Yep.
So I don't know, but really, Fab, it's the same thing in any company for any job. If the person doesn't have desire to be a marketing person or an engineer, it's not going to work. If they're just doing it for money and you're going to get them to do a job they hate, it's going to clash with their own personality. What's hard to know sometimes is people don't even know themselves.
Yeah.
When you're in interviews, some people don't even know what they really want. They're just shooting for something to get a job, and then they hope it works out.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously. I mean, like we said, like it's not a perfect science. I mean, if it was, there would be no recruitment issues. But I think there's a lot of things that we can do, and like you said, at some point is like ultimately like you could evaluate as much as you want and this and that. I think like when you meet the person, you get a bigger vibe for something. But there's something that you did say that sometimes we tend to recruit people that are very similar to us, and while that could work culturally, like fit wise, I think there is a danger also that then you're going to ultimately lose the creativity within the organization. And so you do need some variety. You need some variety as well to make sure that, like, and maybe that's more of a marketing thing than a sales thing, but I think you need some variety in terms of being challenged as a leader and like, okay, this person has a different point of view. I mean, they fit culturally, but they have a different point of view. And I think that's important to bring to the table too.
They still have to fit culturally, right? So you're right. You do need to have some variety, particularly when you're talking to different types of people at a different level. But where you really need to have a lot of varieties at the leadership level.
Yeah.
If you have a company that's moving forward, you've got to have different types of leaders who have different qualities, the doer, the creative one, the one who challenges a lot. So you need to have those different characteristics at a leadership level because you can bounce off each other.
Yeah.
If you're someone who's got great ideas, but you don't follow through on your ideas, you need some person behind you who's going to make sure they follow through, like your ideas. And now what's the next steps? What do we need to do to get this done?
You're right.
That's crucial. And that's crucial. And sometimes we forget that. We just hire people that are like us. Oh, I like him. I got along with him. Okay. But, is he going to fulfill the job? You really have to look at what it is you're looking for in the job to achieve the goal.
Yeah. And that's the other danger, right? With hiring people that are like you is that it might make it even harder to notice if they aren't cutting it because you feel, well, they're like me. If I can make it here, this person should be able to make it there. Maybe there's something I can fix or whatnot, when in reality it's just they're not the right fit.
Yeah.
But because they're so similar to you, you kind of have this blindness in front of you.
Okay. All right. So I think, listen, it's interesting because I've been doing recruitment for years now, and I still haven't found the perfect formula. Because if I had the perfect formula, I could throw it out there. But I definitely think there is a formula. You interview the people, you evaluate them, you question them on specific things that you're looking for in an individual. You challenge them, you see how they react. You push them to an extreme of what they're going to live through to make sure that they have the grit to come through and have the success that you're looking for.
Yeah, and I'd say the same thing in marketing, right? There's also evaluations that you can do. So I would probably do a hybrid of both, obviously depending on what your budgets are and what you're looking for. But I mean, you can evaluate because there are certain traits, right? Like decisiveness and stuff like that will be important at certain levels of the hierarchy, right? Like you need to have a decisive VP of marketing, right? So if you're hiring a VP and they just can't make a decision, that's going to impede their ability to do the job at the end of the day. So I think that's it. I think you definitely need to evaluate. You need to interview, but I think you would also need to find a way to kind of put yourself aside so that you're not hiring somebody who's exactly like you, because that could lead to problems down the line.
Unless you're looking to replace yourself.
Ha! There you go. All right, Paul.
Thanks, Fab.
Thanks, Paul. That was a good one.
It was a good one.
All right. Take care.
Ciao.